What would you do if the most powerful being in the galaxy looked down at you and decided you were nothing more than an amusing insect? I never thought that question would matter to me. Not until I stood in the throne room of the Celestine Empire, surrounded by guards who could atomize me with a thought, facing a princess whose silver hair cascaded like liquid starlight down her shoulders, and heard those words that would change everything. "You're just a simple human," she said, her luminescent skin casting the faintest glow in the crystalline chamber, her violet eyes studying me like I was a specimen under glass. But there was something in the curve of her smile, something almost playful, that told me this wasn't entirely an insult. It was a dare. "My name is Marcus Cole, and 48 hours earlier, I had been a xenoarchaeologist on the Frontier Research Station Kepler-7, cataloging ancient artifacts from a civilization that had vanished 10,000 years before humanity discovered fire. I was nobody special, average in every way that mattered, but I had found something in those ruins, a small crystalline shard that pulsed with an inner light, warm against my palm, like holding a tiny heartbeat. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it would summon a Celestine warship the size of Manhattan to our tiny research station. I didn't know it would drag me across 3 star systems to stand before Princess Lyralei of the Celestine Empire, the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. And I certainly didn't know that this beautiful, arrogant, impossibly graceful woman, with pointed ears that swept back like delicate wings, would become the center of my entire existence. "The Shard of Ethan," Lyralei said, rising from her throne with fluid elegance that made my breath catch despite my situation. She wore a tailored tactical suit in deep midnight blue with silver accents that traced constellation patterns along her shoulders, looking every bit like a commander who had led fleets into battle. "Do you have any idea what you stumbled upon, simple human?" I could feel the guards tensing around me, their hands resting on weapons I couldn't identify. The princess's advisors, elegant Celestines, with that same ethereal glow to their skin and those distinctive pointed ears, whispered among themselves. I was in danger, serious danger. But something about her tone, that almost teasing condescension, sparked something stubborn in my chest. "I know it was buried in ruins that predate your empire by 3,000 years, I said, and the room went silent. Lyralei's violet eyes widened almost imperceptibly. I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know your ancestors didn't create it, they found it, same as me. And I know that if it was just a weapon or a power source, you would have taken it already instead of dragging me here to talk." The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Lyralei did something that clearly shocked her entire court. She laughed. Not mockingly, but with genuine surprise, a sound like crystal chimes in a summer wind. "Oh, how fascinating," she said, descending the steps from her throne until she stood close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her violet irises, the almost invisible luminescence that made her skin seem to glow from within. "A human who actually thinks. I was told your species was primitive, barely out of your nuclear age. We had to start somewhere," I replied, meeting her gaze, even though every instinct screamed at me to look away. "Your people weren't always galaxy-spanning either." Another flash of something in her eyes. Respect? Irritation? Both? "The shard won't respond to us," she admitted, and I could tell by the gasps behind her that this was not information commonly shared. "It hasn't responded to any Celestini in 10,000 years, but it glows for you. It chose you." She tilted her head, those elegant pointed ears catching the light. "The question is, simple human, why?" That was the beginning. In the days that followed, I became the most unusual guest in Celestine history. Not quite a prisoner, not quite free. I was assigned quarters in the royal wing, luxurious rooms that seemed to anticipate my needs. Walls that could become windows to show me any star system I requested. Furniture that adjusted to my exact proportions. But I was also studied, tested, observed, and always there was Lyralei. The princess visited me daily, at first under the pretense of overseeing the research into the shard's connection to me. But I began to notice things. How she would linger after the scientists left. How she would ask questions about Earth, about human customs, about the tiny details of my life that had nothing to do with ancient artifacts. She was lonely. I realized it slowly, the way you notice a tide coming in only after your feet are wet. For all her power, her beauty, her position as heir to an empire spanning 1,000 worlds, Princess Lyralei was utterly, achingly alone. "Don't you have friends?" I asked her one evening, as we sat in my quarters, the walls displaying a recreation of a sunset over the Mediterranean Sea, something I'd described to her from my childhood. She had been oddly quiet, her usual sharp wit subdued. I have subjects, she said softly. Advisors. Suitors who see only my title. But friends require equality, Marcus. And when you're born above everyone, equality is the one thing you cannot have. My chest tightened at the sadness in her voice. That sounds incredibly lonely. Loneliness is the price of power. Every Celestine knows this. She turned to look at me, her silver hair catching the orange light of the simulated sunset. You're different, you know. You speak to me as if I were just another person. It's refreshing. And terrifying. Why terrifying? Because I find myself caring what you think. She looked away quickly, and I could see a faint flush of deeper luminescence across her cheekbones, the Celestine equivalent of a blush. That's not something a princess should admit. I wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but I held back. The gulf between us still felt immense, not just the difference in our species, but in our positions, our worlds, our very existence. What could I possibly offer? Someone who could reshape stars. The answer came 3 weeks into my stay, in the worst possible way. I woke to alarms screaming through the palace, red light pulsing through walls that had gone opaque with emergency protocols. Through sheer stubbornness and a complete disregard for my own safety, I made it to the command center, where I found Lyralei standing before a holographic display of the star system, her face pale even by Celestine standards. The Void Collective, she said, without looking at me, as if she'd known I would come. They've been waiting for this. Waiting for the shard to resurface. On the display, I could see ships, hundreds of them, their designs angular and brutal compared to the elegant Celestine vessels. They poured through some kind of spatial tear, darkening the stars with their numbers. Who are they? Survivors of the civilization that created the shard, Lyralei said, and I could hear a tremor in her voice. She was trying desperately to hide. The Ethani. They were destroyed by a war 10,000 years ago, or so we thought. Apparently, some fled into the void between galaxies. Now they've returned for what's theirs. And what is the shard exactly? She finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before: fear. It's a key, Marcus. A key to a weapon that could sterilize every world in this galaxy. The Ethani used it once before, in their civil war. That's why we thought they were extinct. They nearly destroyed themselves. But they didn't finish the job. And now they want to finish destroying everything else. The battle began within hours. I watched from the observation deck as Celestine ships engaged the Void Collective, beams of light dancing between vessels in a deadly ballet I couldn't fully comprehend. Lyralei commanded from the bridge, her voice steady, even as I could see the toll it took on her. Ship after ship fell. The enemy was relentless, driven by 10,000 years of exile and hatred. They didn't care about casualties, theirs or anyone else's. They cared only about the shard, about the key that resided somehow, impossibly, bonded to a simple human from a backwater planet. They're cutting through our lines, one of Lyralei's admirals reported, his voice tight. At this rate, they'll reach the homeworld within 6 hours. Then we evacuate, Lyralei said. Begin planetary protocols. Your Highness, that was not a request, Admiral. She turned away from the display, and for just a moment, our eyes met across the chaos of the command center. In that glance was everything she couldn't say: the fear, the responsibility, the weight of a civilization resting on her shoulders. And something else. Something that looked almost like goodbye. I found her later, in the quiet of her private study, staring at a hologram of the Celestine homeworld. When I entered, she didn't turn. You should be evacuating with the others, she said. So should you. I'm staying. Someone has to delay them while our people escape. Her voice cracked on the last word. Someone has to give them time. I walked toward her, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the battle raging outside. Lyralei. She finally turned, and I saw that her eyes were bright with unshed tears, that luminescent glow intensified by emotion. Don't, Marcus. Don't make this harder. You were wrong, you know. I stopped an arm's length away from her. That first day, in the throne room, you said I was just a simple human. But you were wrong. I know, she whispered. I knew it the moment you refused to be afraid of me. No, that's not what I mean. I took a breath, steadying myself for what I was about to do. You were wrong, because there's no such thing as just anything. Humans, Celestines. It doesn't matter what we are. What matters is what we're willing to do for the people we care about. I reached out and gently took her hand. Her skin was warm, warmer than I'd expected, that inner glow pulsing softly against my fingers. I know what the shard is. I've known for days, I just didn't want to admit it. Her eyes widened. Marcus, it's not just a key. It's a choice. The Ethan I designed it to bond with someone who would have the wisdom to use it correctly, someone who could see past hatred and fear. That's why it wouldn't respond to the Celestines. You're too close to the conflict, too caught up in ancient rivalries you inherited but never chose. But me, I'm neutral. I'm an outsider. I can see clearly. What are you saying? I squeezed her hand, memorizing the feeling of her fingers interlaced with mine. I'm saying I know how to stop them. The shard isn't just a key to a weapon, it's a key to shutting the weapon down forever, destroying it. But whoever uses it has to channel everything they are through the crystal. It's not dangerous because of what it does to the galaxy. It's dangerous because of what it does to the user. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed immediately by horror. No, Marcus, I won't allow it. You don't get to decide this one, princess. I smiled at her, even as I felt the shard pulsing against my chest where I'd kept it hidden since the first day. That's the thing about simple humans. We're stubborn like that. What happened next became the stuff of legend, though the legends never quite capture the truth. I didn't face the Void Collective alone. Lyralei refused to let me. She commandeered a small shuttle, overriding every safety protocol her own people tried to implement, and flew us both into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Celestine princess and the simple human, streaking toward impossible odds with nothing but faith and desperation. The collective's flagship was a nightmare of dark metal and corrupted light, but inside its core, I could feel the shard responding, calling out to its twin, the activation crystal that the Ethan I had guarded for 10 millennia of exile. Together, Lyralei said as we stood before the weapons control matrix, her hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel her pulse racing. If you're going to be foolishly brave, at least let me share the burden. This could kill us both. Then we'll die fighting for something beautiful. She looked at me. Then, her violet eyes shining with an emotion that stole my breath. You taught me that, Marcus. You taught me that connections matter more than power. That being just something is the most extraordinary thing of all. I'm not going to let you face this alone. I kissed her then, just once, soft and swift and filled with everything I couldn't find words for. Her lips tasted like starlight. When I pulled back, she was glowing brighter than I'd ever seen, that luminescence radiating from her skin like she'd swallowed a sun. For a simple human, she murmured, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, you're remarkably complicated. Together, we activated the shard. The sensation was indescribable, like being pulled apart and reassembled at the atomic level, like hearing every voice that had ever existed sing in perfect harmony, like touching the fabric of the universe itself. I felt Lyralei beside me, her consciousness brushing against mine, and I understood in that moment that the Ethan I hadn't designed this for destruction. They'd designed it for connection, for empathy, for the ability to feel what others felt so deeply that violence became unthinkable. The weapon didn't fire. It couldn't, because in that instant, every being in both fleets, Celestine and Ethan I alike, felt what we felt. They felt each other's fear, each other's hope, each other's desperate longing for peace. 10,000 years of hatred crumbled in the face of a single moment of understanding. I woke in a medical bay, Lyralei asleep in a chair beside my bed, her hand still holding mine. Through the viewport, I could see ships hanging peacefully in space. Celestine and Ethan I, no longer enemies, just survivors of a war that should never have been. You're awake. Lyralei's voice was rough with exhaustion, but her smile was radiant. The councils are already negotiating. There's talk of reintegration, of the Ethan I returning to settled space. You did it, Marcus. You ended a 10,000-year war. We did it, I corrected. And it wasn't about ending war. It was about showing them they didn't have to fight. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against mine. My father says you're a remarkable specimen. He wants to give you a medal, or something equally ridiculous. What do you want to give me? Her smile turned softer, more vulnerable. I was thinking of something along the lines of forever. If you're interested, I pretended to consider it. That's a long time. What if you get bored of a simple human? Impossible, she said, and kissed me again. You're far too stubborn to be boring. The universe is vast. Infinite, really, in ways even the most advanced civilizations can't fully comprehend. And somewhere in that vastness, against all odds, a princess of the stars and a researcher from Earth found each other. They say that some stories end with happily ever after, but ours didn't end at all. It was just beginning. There were treaties to forge, old wounds to heal, and an entire galaxy slowly learning that connection could be stronger than conflict. Lyralei took my hand as we looked out at the stars together, her pointed ears catching the light, her silver hair glowing with that soft inner luminescence that I'd come to love more than I could express. "Ready for forever?" she asked. I smiled, thinking of everything we'd been through, everything that waited ahead. "With you? Always." But even as I said it, I noticed something, a faint pulse from the shard, still resting against my chest, now dimmer but not quite dormant. A reminder that in a universe this vast, there were always more mysteries waiting, always more challenges. And I had a feeling that the princess and her simple human would be facing them together for a very long time to come.